Hello and welcome my partners in crime, welcome back to Murder Analysed. I'm Christina Moore. Now today's case could be a little bit controversial. Okay, I want your opinion on this because yeah, I'd say it's controversial. But anyway, before we get to all this sort of case of today, please, you know what to do. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment, pass them out. Anyway, any button there's on there, press it. I would really appreciate it, and you know, it helps with the algorithm and everything else. And I always forget to say it, so I'm saying it right now. Now today's case, let's go straight into this case, because as I said, it is controversial. I want your opinions on it, so I want your comments, but don't just tell me yes or no, tell me why you believe in this or why you don't. Alright, so today's case is this Glenn Sullivan case, this 54-year-old sexual offender, to tell the truth, rapist, right, in Louisiana in America. And in July 2022, a young girl, and I can't name her nor would I, walked in to a police station and said that this man had groomed her and was sexually abusing her over a period of time. Now, this isn't just an allegation, it wasn't even at that time an allegation, because this girl had proof, because this man had got this 14-year-old girl pregnant. So the police knew, hang on a minute, now we have someone who's named a predator like this, a young girl, came with her family, she told them everything, and this girl was pregnant by this man. That means that there was DNA evidence that linked him to this crime. So let's get out from the beginning. There's no allegation here, this is fact, right? There was facts in this case that could be proven by DNA evidence that this man was the father of a 14-year-old girl that he'd abused, and he was the father of this child, which this girl kept this child. So this Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office, very, very good actually, and this is Louisiana. As this young girl walked in, and don't forget now, right, that she had said this abuse had lasted for a while. He had abused her on multiple occasions. And again, if you are getting a child pregnant when you are abusing these children, you are opening up the door to also giving them many, many different issues and also potential sexual transmitted diseases. So this man had no care or anything for this girl. She told the police that this Glenn Sullivan, who was 54 at the time of his arrest, had groomed her. He had also threatened her with hurt and harm, also threatened her family, to harm her family if she told. This girl was so scared of this man. Now, Glenn Sullivan was a criminal, I suppose, a petty criminal all his life. He'd been in and out of prison for different sort of things. He was known to the police, but he wasn't really known to the police for this sort of behaviour. One, because he may never have been caught for it before. A lot of people don't come forward. But this young girl, this brave young girl, did come forward. And this is when this investigation started. And then he was arrested and charged. And then the pregnancy, of course, the DNA come from the birth of the child. And it was proven that it was his, right? So there was no getting out of this crime. So every law in America is different, really. State laws have their own way of dealing with things. Now in Louisiana we have such a thing as castration, right? And you can either have what they call a medical procedure castration, or you can have the chemical castration, is where they inject you with a serum sort of thing about every 30 days, right? So as part of the deals when you're getting sentenced is to whether you agree to have this sort of thing done or not. So listen, this case is very controversial, I know, but the laws behind this, right, date back about 2008. So it's for certain types of rape or that sort of offences that as part of your plea deal or part of your sentence within that court case, I suppose, that sentence and hearing, that the judge can impose either chemical castration, right, but you can also elect to have physical castration. Now in Sullivan's case, part of his plea deal wasn't chemical castration, because that's where you would have your injections every 30 days or whatever, and they'd be reliant on you to have that done and everything else as part of your plea deal, right? But then when you're in your release from prison, then you would have to literally go, and you would be reliant, or the courts would be reliant on you doing it, just that, actually physically going to have these injections done. Now, most people wouldn't probably turn up until when they're released. They're doing it in, you know, when you're in a confined area and you're managed, yes, but when you're out in the public, and you know, America's a big place, you can go from state to state, they're gone, right? You can't rely on that. So with Sullivan, what the plea deal was is that he would have his physical castration, so that would mean his testicles would be removed under a proper operation by proper surgeons and stuff like that. We're not just going to chop them off, right? And he would agree to that. So he would serve his 50 years. And then at the end of the 50 years, or a week before he was released, he would then be physical castration operation would be performed on him, right? Now the reason that was put into his plea deal is because the laws change, right? Don't they, all the time? You don't know what's going to happen in 50 years, or this man may never be castrated, right? He may never be, because he may serve his whole time or die in prison before he gets out. But if he does get early release, the week before he's released, this will happen to him. So that is the law on that, how this state run their laws. That's how they do it. So you have to think with this man, he'd been nearly 100-year-old if he'd literally served his 50 years, right? But I think what it is, it's for the prosecutors to think if they are released early, then this way that protects the public. So I've heard a lot about this case where they've said this man's being castrated and all this, you know, physically castrated. And yeah, right, if he gets released out of prison before that time, or even if he's when he's 100, right, when he's 100 years old and releases, I think it'd be about 102 or whatever. But yes, he was still a week before he was due to be released out, he would be released. So it does sound controversial, right, when you first look at this case. And when you see it, or when people are advertising it, man castrated. Yes, if he's released, he will be castrated. Absolutely, that's part of his plea deal. But, you know, yeah, people say, well, what damage could he do at, you know, 100 or 80 or whatever? Because this man could get out in 20 years, right? People still offend in the 70s and 80s. I'll tell you that now. They do. So, yes, that's really what the law says in Louisiana. So they're not going to castrate someone while they're still in prison. There's no need for that, right? They're just not. So it's about 1 week before, if he ever gets released early. So yes, it is, but I still think, is it controversial, right? Because a lot of people I've seen online are like, oh my God, you're going to castrate people now. But you know, then you think, what else can you do with them, right? In some states of America, we still have the death penalty, right? We do. So what is it then? But would this stop someone then from doing this sort of crime? Probably not, right, when you think about it, because you think this man, yes, he's took it as a plea deal, and it sounds on paper like you're going to get your 50 years, you've been sentenced, you're going to go down the, you know, Department of Corrections in their little hospital there and have your testicles chopped off. That's not how it is at all. But that will happen a week before he's released or anything else. So for other prisoners, though, that may be coming up for release or have done a shorter time, some crimes are quite bad that some of these predators have done, and they may get 20, 30 years and get out. Yes, sometimes, I don't think this has been offered to many of them. I think it's more the chemical castration. I just think, though, that they've had enough, this area. People have had enough all around the world of these sort of perpetrators getting away with it. And so, yeah, we have to think, is it a deterrent? Would it be? No, as I said before, I think it could end up where people, these predators, just don't leave their victims alive, right, for the fear of getting caught. But I think with him, he hasn't lost anything, has he, really, when you think about it in the long run, you know. He hasn't. He's going to still do his 50 years, so he got a lesser sentence than he would have if he didn't agree to castration. He knows he's at least going to do 30 years, right? He is. He is. If he doesn't do all the 50, but at least 30 he would do. Well, it depends on who gets in and who changes the laws again. So when you're talking about in his 80s or whatever, is he going to be bothered about being castrated? No. So for him, it's not that bad, to tell you the truth. But out in the public, it's made people talk about this and express their opinions on it. And I'd like to know yours. Because when you rape a 14-year-old girl, you threaten a 14-year-old girl, you threaten her with harm, you threaten to murder her, you threaten to murder her family if she's going to say anything, you get her pregnant and everything else. What is a right sentence then for these people? What is it? Should we castrate them the minute they get in there, the minute they're sentenced? Not really, it's not worth it, right, because they're locked up. So yes, in a way I agree with it, and I do believe that sentences are getting harsher. People now, the prosecutors and stuff, are thinking about, right, what's going to happen in the long run, further down the line for these offenders, if they are released. Because they are there to protect the citizens, right? It's the defence's team, and I'm telling you now, the defence jumped at this with him. 50 years, castration, a week before you leave prison. It was a win-win for them, really, because the evidence was so overwhelming. When you have DNA evidence of a child that you produced with a 14-year-old, there's no getting out of it. There's no getting out of it. So when we look at this sort of case, yes, it is this controversial thing at first. It shocks people, oh my God, physical castration. But it's not really what it seems, is it? So this assistant district attorney, his name is Antonio Brad J. Casio. I actually like him. I watched a few interviews with him, and he's trying to say that these crimes are so prevalent, right? They are juvenile, they're against juveniles in this state of Louisiana, right? They're there. They are getting more and more of them. They're getting more and more people coming forward, right? And he says himself, they know that a lot of these crimes are not reported, right? They're just not reported for one reason or another. Sometimes fear, right? Because this girl was so threatened that, you know, luckily that she came forward, but she had the strength inside her to do that, and her family stuck by her. A lot of these kids, though, in this situation are too scared to come forward. So we know there's a lot more of these sort of crimes going on, really. I think the legislation that they brought in 2008 is there to be used, right? And any legislation that will limit or that could limit or deter, right, in a way, should be used. And this man was caught bang to rights, really, so it was a good example of using this legislation. But it takes strong prosecutors, really, strong attorneys, strong assistant district attorneys to use the legislation that is there for them to use, to make sure that these sentences are harsh and that people believe that justice has been served. And I think in this case, justice had been served. The assistant district attorney there believed that this case was so severe. And to tell you the truth, people have had enough, right, of young girls getting abused and harmed and everything. And when you think that this young girl had kept this child, right, and it is proven that she's kept this child, that's her lifelong commitment to that child. She has to bring up this child for the rest of her life. So when we talk about physical castration, yes, it's controversial when we use it against sex offenders because, you know, they're human rights, right? But we have to think to when a person or a child like this has kept a child of this sort of rape and abuse and is loved and caring for that child for the rest of its life, because it's not the child's fault, right, how that child got there. So this young girl at a very young age, and her family, very supportive, this family, are bringing up this child the best way possible. This girl has also finished college and everything else and making good with her life. She really is. So this girl is a survivor. But when we look at this Sullivan, right, when we take a look at his crime history and stuff, yes, it was constantly ongoing. But when people like him start to then cross the line and do this sort of thing, threaten, he was well known for being quite violent, an aggressive person. And when you think of a 14-year-old at the time having this stuff done to her and the threat of harm to her and her family if she has said anything, this girl is so brave, right? She is just so brave. So then when the prosecutors get hold of this and you think, yes, this man, because America do give, especially in Louisiana, their sentences are quite harsh, and so they should be. But are they working? Because they're seeing so many of these cases. So did they use this physical castration as a sort of deterrent for others, right? It could be that. But this Glenn Sullivan, he had the choice. This isn't something that was put on him, right? The court made a decision to sentence him to 50 years. But before that court decision, he done a plea deal. Now this is part of his plea deal, right? So he agreed to this. So he agreed to 50 years in prison on the conditions that he has the physical castration. That means that under a proper surgeon and surgery and everything else, that the testicles are removed permanently. There is no going back. And a lot of people have said, when I've talked about this case, you know, to others and told them I'm going to do this case, why would you castrate someone who's got 50 years in prison? Well, many of you know when we talk about the reforms in the criminal justice system across the world, to tell you the truth, just because someone gets 50 years doesn't mean to say that that's going to be the time they serve. This man could do 10 years and get let out. Now he understands that, he's 54 now, so even if he did his 50 years, he's never getting out. But say the laws did change in that state, and it made it easier for these sort of people to be back out on the streets. This is, I think, what the prosecutors were thinking about. And this is why, yes, they reduced his sentence to 50 years, but on the understanding that he has a physical castration. And then if he is ever released early, right, he would not be such a danger to young children out there. So there is reason why these cases are now more thought about when we're sentencing people like this, because we have had so many, especially in this country, in the UK, that they don't get 50 years, right? I'm telling you that, they don't in this country. He'd be lucky to, in this country, have got 4 years, right? So my question to you is, when we talk about the practical side of castration, the safety side of castration, to do that to someone, is the law sort of stepping over its bounds or not, right? Is it about time, though, that we started to think, when we sentence these people, about the possibility that they could be back out on our streets and raping other children, right? Multiple times this man did. Of course he had to admit it because there's evidence of the child being born. So we talk about murder, don't we? We talk about all this other stuff and we give these people a long time in prison. But when you're talking about this sort of case where you have a child of 14, her whole life has been changed, right? She didn't agree to this, there was no consent, there couldn't have been, right? She went, this really strong-willed girl, went to the police, even though with all the threats of death that she was having from this man, she still went and she confronted this man head on, even in court, right? Even in court with this evidence. She is the one that has the life sentence, if you want to look at it that way, because this child is hers, right? It's hers. She didn't choose to have a child at 14, right? She didn't make that choice. People do, right? But she didn't. She didn't. She had a life and he ruined that life. And then she accepted what had happened to her. She had made the changes in her life to keep this child and bring this child up the best way that she can with the help of her family. She's educated herself. She's done everything that a new mum, a person that loves their child, would do. So why shouldn't he have a punishment that fits that crime? When you have left someone who's had to change their life forever, shouldn't your life be changed? And I think the prosecutor or the assistant prosecutor in this case, he believed that that's what should happen, right? And so my question to you is, do you believe in this, where we're doing physical castration, right? We're not just chopping them off. It's under medical, you know, a whole medical team do it. Because of these limited conditions that's on him, in case that someone down the line, as the governments change and all this change and policies change and everything all over the world, that this man may be released one day. They're thinking ahead now. Is it though also saying to a lot of these offenders, this is what could happen to you? There's two ways of looking at that, right? This man left this child alive. He left her alive to come and report it and keep the child. If we are going to use this sort of tactics, is that going to change the MO then of the perpetrators, where they would take that life rather than allow someone, you know, to have them prosecuted and have this happen to them? So when I ask you for your opinions on whether you agree with it or you disagree, tell me why you agree with it or why you disagree with it. Do I agree with it? Yeah, I do, right? Because I know the justice system, especially in this country and in America, it's changing so much, really. It is, you know, there's woke people and you've got parole boards that let these people out, we believe them. You know, they believe their stories, they're conformed, they're not going to do it anymore. So yeah, just in case this man ever got out, yes, I personally do. But I want to know your opinions. It doesn't matter about my opinion. Everyone probably knows my opinion without me even saying it. But it's more about what you think is right in this case. Do you agree? Do you not? It's up to you. But it's such a shocking case, and when we look at the laws now, we are getting harsher on different criminals and on different cases, especially like this, when people are charged with this sort of crimes. We are. Because we need to make sure that people like this are off our streets. Because this wouldn't have been the last girl that he had done this to if he had remained outside. So my thoughts go to this girl, because really, what an amazing girl, 14-year-old, to come forward herself. She walked in to this Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office and told it all, clearly told it all, and told them, I even have evidence, undeniable evidence, that this man is the one that done this to me. Anyway, I'll speak to you soon. Till the next time. Bye-bye.